Hello. Now we finally move to the bishop e7 variation, well, the most solid one and the most popular, because nowadays all those lines with bishop c5 are becoming rather fashionable. But some time ago, at the beginning of the Royal Opus, when the theory was developing, then bishop e7 was by far the most popular move. I can remind you also that at that time Berlin defense was supposed to be passive and not very, not really equalizing. So most of the players who played Royal Opus were playing bishop e7 here. Of course, then with computers, there are lots of assessments. Lots of variations have some different assessments. So I believe that in general, the most reliable variation, and which causes for now white main problems, is Marshall, which I'm going to show you in the next lessons, during the next couple of lessons. So now today I want to show you everything besides rook e1, which is a main move here. Rook e1, of course, logical, because white wants to get c3 d4 to get the center, but as we will see, it's not always realizable. So lately white, in a way out of desperation, because at least on the top level, it seems that the Marshall gambit is doing very well. So white is trying some different options to avoid it and to get a game, maybe a slightly more comfortable position with playing d3. So today, now I will show you the d3 variation. But first, let's check d4, d4, e4. This is the transposition. We have checked it in one of the previous lessons, totally harmless in my opinion, and you can, I think you can check it in this lesson when I was telling you about the knight takes e4 variation. I mean, open Spanish, open Royal Opus, knight e4, and then if white, before castling, playing d4, e4 castle, then black's best move is bishop e7, and I think it's there is no problem at all for black. I explained there in this lesson how exactly black can equalize, at least equalize, sometimes even get slightly better. So this variation is harmless. Sometimes white takes on c6, which is looking very strange, of course, dc6, because basically, a couple of moves ago, black have played a6, and white could have taken immediately on c6, which also, of course, I consider in one of the previous lessons, and I think black is perfectly fine there. Also here there is no problem for black, but there is some point. I mean, the idea is that the knight is already on f6, so black has a little uncomfortability defending this e5 pawn. For instance, after d3, probably black has to play knight d7, and then the bishop on c8, is a bit passive at the moment, but still, it seems to me like it's even a better version of this Berlin defense with d3, bishop c5, bishop c6, dc6, because bishop on e7 actually is better placed than on c5. And I think, here you can check, there are some games, but I don't see slightest problems for black in this position. So sometimes white would try to play knight c3 with the idea after knight d7 to go d4. At least that can justify the bishop takes c6 variation, e d4, queen takes d4, and let's say castles bishop f4. That is playable, but I think the position is more or less equal. Knight c5, and now white is trying to keep the queens on the board. Queen e3, knight e6, rook a d1, let's say queen e8. I think there was a game a very good game. Levon Aranyan beat Alexander Grishuk one of the years in Vaikanze. You can have a look. This game, if I remember correctly, it was exactly this variation. So, well, still Black has two bishops. It has a little bit some issue with the bishop on c8. But in general, two bishops is quite a serious asset, yeah. And probably Black would just start pushing his pawns on the queen side, a5, a4, etc. I think the position is complicated, but more or less equal. I don't think there is any real problem for Black here. Another interesting idea is actually, instead of knight d7, to play bishop g4, h3, bishop h5. Because of course, then if White is playing some solid move like d3, then Black can always play knight d7, and this is even a better version because the bishop is out on h5 and Black is at least equal. So White usually is trying to play g4 here, and first of all, I'm not sure that after bishop g6, White has any advantage. Knight takes e5, knight takes e4. There is some theory, well, White tries a bit, but I think finally Black equalizes here as well. And another interesting point that after knight takes g4, h4, bishop g4, it might well be that Black has just quite a good long-term compensation in this position. Let's say king g2, h5, and maybe somewhere rook h6. Black even wants to play rook h6, rook f6, and in any case queen d6, long castle. It's a strange position where, Black has some long-term compensation. Of course, it is risky for Black, but also for White in a way. So it's another way, to play for somebody who likes some sharp game. But all in all, if you want something solid, I think knight d7 is good enough. So bishop takes c6 is quite a rare guest nowadays in the opening theory on the grandmaster level. But d3 is becoming popular nowadays, quite popular. Frankly, I don't really think it's very dangerous, but at least in this, I've played it myself some few years ago. It's a strange situation that in all those lines with d3, a3, knight c3, it's quite a new system. I would say it became popular maybe 10 years ago. People started to play it, and it's a strange situation because I will show you there are lots of different options for Black, and it seems to me that practically each of those lines are good enough to equalize, but none of it like equalizing fully, completely. Yeah. So I always felt that with Black I wouldn't worry much playing against the system. From other point of view, you need to choose. You need to choose which exactly system you want to play, and to analyze it, to be sure that you are equalizing there, because always White keeps a little bit of pressure. Very, very tiny plus, almost nothing, but still there is no way yet for Black to totally equalize and, like completely, and to kill the line, so to say. It's not killed yet, and for instance, Jan Nepomniachtchi is scoring very well, scoring lots of victories in this, seemingly harmless variation. So d3, b5, now of course the pawn on e5 is already hanging, so Black has to play b5 or d6. Actually d6, c3, all of a sudden castles rook e1. Now we transpose to this variation, which, if you remember, also can occur via the Berlin. Strangely enough, if in this move order, I already spoke a bit about it. Knight f6, d3, d6 castles, bishop e7, c3, and let's say here probably Black's best is anyway to play e6, and White plays bishop a4, and we get here. So if you want, you can have a look at this lesson where I'm discussing knight f6, d3, I mean Berlin with d3. But I can repeat a bit here, just that after c3, castle rook e1, I personally consider that this is not a clear-cut equality. I mean, in my opinion, that is definitely playable for White, even though, again, probably with a very precise play, Black should manage to get a decent game. I mean, good game. B5 usually is played. Okay, this of course is possible to play it like typical Ruy Lopez plan, Rook e8, Bishop f8, but it's a bit slow. For instance, h3, h6, and maybe d4 is interesting now. Because black's idea, maybe after knight f1, to try to get b5, bishop c2, d5. And that might be good enough to equalize, but white has some interesting try, like playing d4 here, b5, bishop c2, some kind of, typical also Ruy Lopez, which reminds a lot the Zaitsev variation. We are going to study it later on. It's playable for white, at least. I don't know if white is better, I'm not sure, but it's definitely playable. In general, I always consider that when white manages to get the center, then, well, even if it's sometimes not enough to get an advantage, but at least it's definitely playable for white. So black usually plays b5, bishop c2, d5 very quickly. So now the point is at e d5, queen d5. It seems to be okay for black. So I'll just repeat that there is a d4 move, which is quite interesting, needs to be investigated. But normally main line is knight bd2. Then black has this idea of playing d4, h3, knight d7, trying to get the knight to c5. It's not doing badly, by the way, statistically. I personally don't like this type of play. This pawn structure, especially sometimes CDs, and black has to take with a pawn, and white has some initiative on the center and on the king side. Again, it's playable, but not to my taste. I think more popular is to take d4 here, d4, bishop e6, and after queen e2, sometimes white wants to play a4 to bother the queen side. Black's pawn on b5. It's not much for white, if anything, but this line was very popular at some point. I believe some 10 years ago, quite many games were played in this variation, and of top level games. Levon Aranyan with black played a lot of it. I think that black were close to equalize, but not completely. I somehow seems that white has a little bit more comfortable game here. For instance, knight d7 is, let's say, rook d1, queen b8, maybe queen c8 is also possible, to put the queen on c8, but queen b8 looks logical. And then something like this, bishop b3, trying to exchange the bishop and then to use this d5 square, maybe the knight, white knight will start to go to d5. Okay, again, nothing very special for white, but probably not totally equal. So d6 is a definitely playable move, but b5 is more principle. The idea is that bishop b3, and the idea is that now, black is trying to sort of win a tempi in case if white is playing c3, then of course always after d6, c3, b5, white always retreats to c2 already. So now, for instance, if black plays d6, then already c3 variation is much less dangerous because black has knight a5, c5, which we are going to see in a minute. But first, I just want to tell you that hard to say which move order is better, to castle. Actually, maybe castling is also okay. It's even more simpler in a way to castle because, again, white can move to this variation playing knight c3, d6, a3, which is the main thematic of this lesson. That is always possible. But there is an additional option of playing a4, which is, I should also tell that rook e1, d6, c3 will be also transposed into bishop b3, d6. But maybe the only way for white to make use of castle instead of d6 is to play a4. But still, after both bishop b7 or b4, white tried sometimes to manage without rook e1, because rook e1 we will consider in one of the next two lessons. All this theory I will show you. So that would be kind of transposition. for black, so it doesn't need to learn any additional line. So, and without rook e1, well, white could try to play a5, knight d2, but finally, sooner or later, I mean, in the majority of the games, white would anyway play rook e1. Also because sometimes black wants to play d5 in some variations, so rook e1 is also against d5. So maybe castles is also fine. Matter of taste. There is nothing wrong with d6. Again, the only way for white is a4, is to make use of the move order. So you have to choose, if you're playing black, whether you want to play d6, a4, or castle a4. Otherwise, it all leads to transpositions. Here, a4, I'm not already sure that bishop b7 is good enough here because, compared to castle a4, bishop b7, here maybe white can try to make use of the fact that his rook is not on e1 by playing knight c3, for instance. That might be a bit tricky. So that's why here after a4, first of all, black can simply play b4 and a5, castles, and knight bd2, bishop e6. Again, we will consider all those variations. Usually white has a rook on e1, but I mean, 90% of cases, white will anyway play rook e1, and this is a very solid line for black, I believe, perfectly fine. So that is possible always. But there is another move, bishop d7. Well, the thing is that if bishop g4, obviously then c3 comes, and then black might just lose a tempi, because at some point white will play h3, and retreating on h5 is usually not the best choice for black in Ruy Lopez, so he will have to go back. That's why bishop d7 is, it's a logical move, because again, as I mentioned to you, that once white plays d3, puts his pawn on d3, quite often, it's better for black to keep the bishop on this diagonal, not on b7, but on d7, just that he has bishop e6 sooner or later. So c3 now, here white tries to get little something. I mean, it's playable for white, because the idea is that if castle, now very important move, bishop c2. That's, I think, the only way for white to fight for advantage, because otherwise black wants to play knight a5 and c5. For instance, knight bd2, knight a5, bishop c2, c5, rook e1, knight c6, and here black has no problem at all. Actually, strangely enough, in this setup, when white is playing c3, d3, probably a4 is not needed. Actually, it's maybe even in black favor, because white here, with this setup, white is already trying to organize some play on the king side, transferring the knight to g3, maybe playing d4, but queen side is more black's territory, and playing a4 is kind of losing a tempo and giving black some actually chances to get a play on this side of the board, which is not typical for Ruy Lopez, because quite often in many lines a4 is useful, but not really in this particular variation when white has pawns on c3 and d3. For instance, knight f1, and black can play b4 followed by rook b8 and start to organize some counterplay on the queen side. Black's position is perfectly fine, no problem at all. So that's why the white's idea of playing a4, bishop d7, c3 is that after castle to play bishop c2. The idea, the point is that white wants to avoid knight a5, c5, because here obviously white would just play b4. And this is playable for white. Let's say rook e8, and now white is playing his typical plan. It's with a bishop on d7, d5 is a bit less effective. Quite often, bishop is not standing so well on d7. So white might get some serious initiative after d5. So that is why after c3, usually black tries to play knight a5 immediately, bishop c2. There was some games white played bishop a2, but it's a bit, a little bit strange. For instance, ba, knight bd2, and then actually white would try to play quite often bishop b1, bishop c2, and try to get back the pawn. I think finally black was doing okay in this line. but bishop c2 is the main move, c5, so that is black's idea. He just wants to get his knight a5, c5. But now there are some direct lines which has to be checked, like d4, queen b8, if I remember correctly, was the main move. Now bishop g5, etc. I think finally you can check this line. Black were able to equalize here, but it's at least, well, there is some venom, in this variation for white. So a4 is it's a possible way of playing. The main, as I understand, the main problem is that actually black can just play b4 here. So all in all, usually white is trying to play a4 after rook e1, not d3. So if white is playing d3 instead of rook e1, then he wants, most of the time, he wants to play with this system with c3, so-called closed Ruy Lopez. Well, this type of position white can always get, rook e1, c3, d3. It is playable. Well, I don't think there is any advantage, but it might be for a white player, might be, I think, not a bad idea to have it in your repertoire, because here there is no direct way for black to make a draw, to have a, it will be a complicated game, probably quite equal, but playable for white. So that is one option. Another option is this nowadays fashionable a3, knight c3 variation. So let's start with c3, castles, rook e1. Again, this line this position you can have with white after bishop e7. Difficult for black to avoid it, but there is no reason to avoid, because in general black is doing fine here. I believe knight a5 is the main line. Sometimes black would also plays knight b8, knight d7, or bishop b7 first, knight b8, knight d7. So trying to play in the same fashion like Breyer variation. Well, the only difference that there the pawn is on d4, which is definitely much more convenient for white. So this is also playable, but frankly, I don't see any reason why not to play knight a5. It's very logical, bishop c2, c5. And I think it's doing very well for black. There is no advantage, really. But I just want to attract your attention on the move further h3. I think it's more more tricky than knight bd2, because knight bd2, now knight c6, black is playing knight f1, very logical play, but black also playing some logical moves, bishop e6, knight g3, h6, let's say h3, rook e8. Well, here black even has rook c8, but let's say rook e8, and black is slowly preparing d5, I mean bishop f8, so very healthy play. If white starts to go knight h2, this typical Ruy Lopez play, queen f3, knight g4, knight f5, and black is already can push d5 and has a very good game. This knight on f5 is far from mate yet. Bishop will get to f8, not so dangerous. So usually white is trying to play d4 here at least, but in this position black has just takes everything, rook c8, and black has enough resources to equalize. If I remember correctly, I played myself once a game against Christopher Lutz here in 2000, which year was it? Maybe 2003 or 2004, I think 2003. And it's fine for black. Bishop b3, and now d5 is enough to equalize. So this is pretty harmless, I believe. h3 is more tricky. This move further, maybe, I still don't believe it gives white an advantage, but at least now black has to make a choice. I mean, the idea is that, what I thought, that if black plays knight c6, very logical move, then maybe d4. Of course, I understand it's like a tempi down, practically, compared to the main lines of Chigorin variation. I'm going to present it to you in the next lesson. But still it may be playable. I mean, I don't know if it's better really, if white has anything, but at least it's playable. Well, here black can take this bishop, ed, cd, knight b4, but still knight c3 takes. Well, maybe a little bit better for white. I mean, at least it's possible to investigate this variation. Then another idea is that if you just take on d4, whatever with, let's say here, queen d4, maybe knight will get to c3. let's say bishop e6, knight c3. Again, I don't know if it's anything really special for white, but it's better than having the knight on g3. And okay, at least may be interesting to check this. And otherwise, so the idea of h3 is that if knight c6, d4, if white will be a bit better here, or at least if you are happy playing this, then with all other moves, let's say queen c7, now already you move to this plan, and actually queen on c7 is not the most convenient, the place for the queen here. Or let's say if bishop b7, that white also can start to play knight bd2 and knight f1, etc. I mean, bishop on b7. Usually it's not bad, still probably it's good enough for black. Black should probably equalize. But already it's a bit more difficult, because I consider this line when black simply goes knight c6, bishop e6, h6, rook e8, for example. This is really clear-cut equality, very difficult for white to find any real idea. But with a bishop on b7, already a little bit more chances for white, to get at least interesting playable position. Let's say here bishop f8 and maybe now d4. Even though it can be that something like that, after something like that, black might be in time to equalize, but a bit, at least, not so simple as with this setup. And what else after h3? Well, maybe rook e8. I was thinking about it and finally had an idea that for black, I would maybe consider playing rook e8. The idea that after knight d2, just to move to the same line, yeah? I mean, playing this and bishop e6 and d4 again here. Well, it's probably fine, even with a knight on f1 instead of knight g3. Still, that should be okay for black. And rook e8 is a useful move in any case. And in case of d4, if white insists on playing this d4 with a knight on b1, maybe then you can just already take everything, bishop b7. And this is a kind of theoretical position with a very important tempi rook e8. Probably should be fine for black. But anyway, again, it definitely will not be a problem. It's totally clear that in this setup, black is okay, yeah, objectively. But at least it's one of those positions where it's difficult to analyze it, difficult to find a very clear equality, very clear cut. I mean, you will get some game with white. I will not promise you more than that, frankly, but at least a kind of typical Ruy Lopez position. But anyway, yeah, that's not very popular, of course, now, because usually white, when he plays Ruy Lopez, he wants a bit more than just a playable equal complicated position. So on the grandmaster level, a3 move in this position is nowadays the most popular. Well, the idea is that white wants to play knight c3, and then, I mean, sometimes, first of all, knight can get to g3 via e2. So this maneuver, knight c3, knight e2, knight g3. So anyway, very often white is trying to transfer the knight there, and also having some knight d5 ideas. So it's yeah, it's quite popular nowadays. So let's now study this variation, and I will try to show you what are the black's options against this a3, because if you are playing black, especially if you are playing Marshall after bishop e7, yeah, very likely you will be facing this variation in the near future, at least more than once. So and again, with white, it's definitely, I can recommend you definitely to have it as an option in your repertoire, because well, it's solid, it's safe, and there is no absolutely bulletproof equality yet shown, in the series. So the line is not sterilized, well, yet. So yeah, and that is already nowadays Ruy Lopez, yeah, which is a very solid opening and very difficult for white to get anything special. At least getting a slightly more pleasant, complicated position is already, I would say, quite an achievement by the modern standards. So let's now After this introduction, I will show you what is the state of affairs, theoretical state of affairs in this opening line. First, it's important to mention that it pretty much depends on the move order. So if black starts here with a castle and white still plays the same line, knight c3, d6, a3, then we get to the main position of this variation. But in case if black starts with d6, a3, then he has a couple of other options which are quite interesting here. First of all, bishop g4, as I've mentioned already, white just moves already to the c3, knight bd2 setup, and bishop is misplaced on g4, even though, of course, it's still not too bad, but that is at least white is usually happy playing this position with a kind of extra tempi a3, because most likely after h3, black will retreat somewhere to e6 anyway. But bishop e6 is actually playable. Not very popular move, but perfectly playable, because if white just takes and plays c3, then he gets a typical position, black castles usually, and white is trying to play rook e1, which sometimes can be a bit more comfortable for white, but here white actually lost practically a tempi playing a3, because already in this position most logical is to play a4. So with this tempi down, I believe shouldn't be anything special for white. But maybe actually knight c3 is interesting here. That might be a good reaction against bishop e6, because now if black castle, then we move to this knight d5. This I'm going to show you later. One of the possible lines in this variation. But otherwise, bishop takes b3, c b3, strangely enough, might be a bit uncomfortable for black because of this c line. Yeah, there is a c line, and if black manages to get his pawn to c5, of course, will have probably a good position. But wherever black is trying to do it, to play, let's say, playing knight b8, then immediately white gets d4. And otherwise, let's say castles, white can try to play bishop e3, maybe also bishop g5, followed by rook c1. Let's say, again, if black is trying to play knight b8, then d4 comes. And I guess in case of d5, quite typical, white might have some pressure after bishop g5. So the c line, the c7 pawn might become weak at some point. So I don't know if after knight c3, maybe black's best is anyway to castle, and then it's a transposition. But another very interesting line is knight a5, bishop c2, c5. Right here, knight c3, it's knight c3 and bishop e6. Because after castle knight c3, this variation doesn't work so well already. I will explain you why. But here, black is in time to get both c5 and bishop e6. And it's very solid. It's very solid line. I think, some strong players like Dean Liren used to play it. Then he dropped this line, started to play some other variation. I don't really see a big reason why, because I'm not sure if white really has any advantage here. But, it's definitely possible, playable for black. Mainly white has now two options. One is very positional, to play bishop g5, let's say take on f6 and knight d5. Knight c6 and then c3, followed by a4. I think that was how Vachier Lagrave played once or twice in this position. Then white's strategical idea is to open up maybe a line at some point to play knight e3, exchange this bishop, and trying to have this typical for this type of position, for this variation, typical very tiny but small positional pressure. It's possible. I don't frankly believe it's given white anything if black is playing accurately. But still, for instance, I remember Vachier Lagrave won a game with white against a strong 26-50 player in this variation. So probably it is an option for white. But the most principal move is strange move knight h4. Very strange move, but white is using a chance to get the knight to f5. And here This position is, let's say, castles knight e5. It's very direct. It seems that black is not so easy for black to equalize here, or because the main tactical justification is that in case of bishop a2, rook a2, knight e4, just trying to take the pawn, that it seems strangely enough that in this position, knight d5 followed by queen g4, well, white has a very powerful compensation for the pawn. So this has to be checked. This line is not very popular. I mean, not so many games in this variation, but definitely playable for black. But normally black is playing just castle, or even sometimes he castles first before playing d6, so then it gets to this position anyway. So this is a tabia. This is the main position of the variation, castles knight c3. And here black has a huge choice. I mean, almost any move actually makes sense. And as I've mentioned already, I believe that for black, my recommendation would be, if you're playing it with black, try to choose at least one or maybe two lines and really to analyze it till the end. Because what happens here, I for instance, players like Levon Aranyan and many players who are playing this variation more than once, they always jump from one line to another line. So it seems like this equalizes and this also very close to equal, but from time to time experiencing problems. So maybe what I would do as black is to choose some line and really just to analyze it, because I'm absolutely sure that with good opening preparation, with good work, you will manage to equalize here with black. Which line depends, it's a matter of taste, depends on what do you want. I mean, you want to play for equality or you want to get a more complicated game. There is a wide choice. So let's go one by one. The most straightforward is bishop g4, very direct move. Bishop e3 because knight d4 is a threat, and now knight d4. So, okay, bishop takes d4 is forced, takes knight d5. And actually, this is quite popular nowadays, maybe because of the fact that it's extremely straightforward. And again, black has a choice. I think black is doing pretty well at this moment of time in this variation. I mean, normally knight d7 was for quite a long time the main move. But now Levon Aranyan started to play knight takes d5, bishop takes d5, rook c8. Well, using the fact that white cannot, black wants to play c6, and white cannot really take this pawn, of course, because rook b6 and he's losing the bishop. Well, a bit strange concept. I mean, this pawn structure, this white color bishop is very powerful, and the pawn structure is a bit, compromised, black's pawn structure, so cannot be much anyway. But it doesn't look so convincing, frankly. I don't know, maybe it equalizes. I believe that Levon keeps on playing this variation with black, and most of the time he's making draws with all top players, so it's very possible that this line also equalizes. I just strategically don't like, so to say, the look of it, frankly, but maybe it's it's good enough. Because now, if white is playing a4, a very logical way of playing to try to get the a line, then the idea here of black is to play d5 and in e d5 c5. That is the point. Then put the bishop on d6, and probably this extra pawn will not mean much with this bishop on b3. I think white's main move is bishop c6 now, according to the theory, trying to prevent it, and then bishop f6, a4, rook b8. Again, not to my taste, this kind of play, because there is a strategical danger. Black color bishop is quite passive with this pawn on d4. But again, I trust Levon Aranyan. He's a very experienced Ruy Lopez player. And by the way, if you want to study game from the black side of the bishop e7 in general, how to play this bishop e7 system, I really recommend you to analyze his games, to look at his games, and probably there are nowadays at least two players who are playing incredibly well with black. All those positions after bishop e7, though this is, well, without no surprise, Magnus Carlsen and Levon Aranyan. So his games you should really check if you want to play bishop e7 to have it in your repertoire. And I trust that even if it doesn't look great to my taste, but if he's playing it, it's definitely not bad. He knows what he's doing. So that can be a choice. Then another, a very even more strange, nowadays c5 becomes popular, which is really, because you just give up this d5 square. It looks very strange, but Ding Liren is playing it all the time and having good results. He's making draws here all the time. Maybe it works. And his idea is that after a4, again, the typical move to try to get the A line, he just plays bishop e6. And this position, it looks pretty dubious to me from black, because knight usually is stronger than a bishop. Here, white has a bit better pawn structure and looks like a pleasant plus for white, but computers are not agreeing with it. And Ding Liren is very comfortable playing this position. So maybe it's also okay for black. But usually what was always the main line is knight d7, threatening knight e5. So white is playing h3, taking on f3 and c6. There are a lot of games of Tomaszewski. If you want to study this variation, then probably you should study his game first of all, because I know that he analyzed a lot this position. He tried, to fight against this system in the most straightforward way. And I believe it must be enough to equalize, even though still you need to know what you are doing with black, because white still keeps a bit of pressure. For instance, he can usually, at the beginning of this variation, white would normally take on e7, here play queen g3 and start to push the f pawn. Let's say rook c8, f4, c5, bishop a2, and then keep the structure and trying to go for rook e1, e5. I mean, you need, there is some danger for black, but probably it shouldn't be anything very special. But then I saw also white Caruana played knight f4 here, so he tried to keep the knight, knight to e2, sometimes even g4, queen g2, knight e2, f4, this kind of plan. Of course, strategically, black has, a bit dangerous position, because white's bishop is very strong. It doesn't have the opposition. And the black color bishop is definitely much more passive. So maybe it's okay for black, but again, as in many other lines of this system, close to equal, maybe objectively, let's say computer-wise, it's equal, but in a practical game, maybe not so easy. So again, bishop g4. Maybe it's good, maybe it's equalizing, but a bit more pleasant for white to play. And in general, when analyzing, studying this variation for white color, I was quite happy. I thought, okay, it's maybe not much, but no forced draw, and I can still press. So frankly, myself, I would probably not play this line, not because it's bad, but just because I believe there are some other variations which are, probably easier for black to play, and probably also good enough for equality. What are those lines? Well, another direct move is bishop e6. Again, maybe now bishop e3 makes sense. Well, the difference is that black has d5 already here, and then bishop g5. There were some games like this. Well, I'm not sure if white really gets anything here, but it's interesting to check it. Anyway, knight d5, that's, by the way, what I played once with Alexei Shirov. Maybe it was 2017 year in Sochi. White is a little bit better here. And by the way, there was a game Karyakin-Carlsen, one of the games of the World Championship match. I think game number 11, if I remember correctly. Knight d4. Again, it's a bit passive, this variation. Black is really trying to play for a draw, but frankly, maybe he has enough resources to make a draw without too many efforts. So usually white is playing this structure. Takes, let's say, and then strategically, white strategical plan is to get queen g4, and then bishop d2. Then he wants to push pawns on the king side, f4, h4, h5, so he has a better pawn structure, slightly better pawn structure. Of course, yeah, that's all he has. Maybe a little bit better bishop, but all in all, obviously, it shouldn't be much. And black has to try to create counterplay, playing c5, c4. That's important, because if black is playing passively, then white will slowly gain some space on the king side, and maybe his advantage can increase. So here, queen d7. By the way, I think queen c8 might be also interesting, to put the queen on c8. But Alexei played queen d7, and I think quite important for white, before he starts some actions on the king side, is to get b3, a4. This type of structure. I mean, sometimes also bothering black on the a line. If he moves, let's say, his rook away, then the a line might become an asset at some point. So a4, and after c4, I think that is what Shirov played against me. And now I played h4. White has different ideas. Bishop g5, one of the ideas, with the idea that bishop g5, hg5, and then f4, f5, sometimes also h5, h6. Actually, at some point I got finally the game ended in a draw, but I had already a serious advantage. So again, very close to equal, probably nothing really for white here. But you need to, if you want to play this line, I'm sure if you analyze it accurately, you will find a very precise way to equalize and to make a draw here, probably. But over the board, it's not so easy. So again, white keeps a bit of pressure in this variation as well. Then, of course, there are many moves just to play a game. Let's say rook b8. Even I think Magnus Carlsen played it in tiebreak against first game of tiebreak in his match against Karyakin. Also possible. I mean, rook b8 makes some sense. Move, but not that popular, because after all, of course, if you are playing black, you want something a bit more direct, because rook b8 is just improving the position a little bit, and as if saying, okay, saying to white, show me what you want here. But still, not too many players, they want to play like this. So another way of playing is bishop b7. Again, as I've mentioned already more than once, that once if white has this c2, d3, e4 pawn structure, normally bishop on b7 is not that good. But again, also very playable. For instance, h3, and the plan is, maybe an interesting plan for black is to play queen d7, and then white has all kind of moves. Okay, he can play knight d5, but quite often it's a bit too early, because black can change knights, maybe play knight d8, change bishops. So, but white has lots of moves like rook e1, bishop d2, lots of waiting moves. I mean, not really waiting, improving the position a little bit, but definitely playable. But let's say if white is trying to maneuver the knight to g3, I think there was a game, Giri Grishuk, rapid chess, very logical way of playing, getting the knight to g3. Then I just want to show you a very interesting plan in this position, which is to play knight d8 and to transfer the knight to e6. Then black is trying to play c5, and at some point trying to get d5 also. So bishop b7 is playable, but also I believe white, it will not make white stop playing this line. So, not again a clear-cut way to equality. I can recommend you, if you just want a complicated game with, and you can play bishop b7, queen d7, and just play a game. But maybe white still keeps a bit of a advantage here. Then, not a bad idea is to play knight b8 now. So trying to go knight d7, bishop b7. I think that was played against me by Hari Krishna once. Wesley So used to play also like this, a very solid move. So white has a choice of playing a4, which is quite straightforward, before knight d5. Maybe actually he can get a bit better here. Take c6, bishop b3, knight d7, d4. And let's say if queen c7, maybe a5. Playable position, probably not much for white, but it's an option to play like this. I played knight e2 here myself, and I think this is the most popular move. Knight bd7, black probably wants to get knight c5, bishop e6, something like that. So I think I played c3 just to have knight c5, bishop c2. And this position, yeah, it's a game. I would say it's not too bad for black, but white at least has a typical Ruy Lopez position. Let's say c5, knight g3, knight b6, d4, queen c7, let's say h3, a5, rook e1. Black has, of course, some, much better version than this Chigorin variation of the main line, which I'm going to show you during the next lesson. But still, again, it's also playable for white. The computer is assessing this position as close to equal. But okay, yeah, it's a game. If you like this type of game with black, just a complicated positional game, typical for Ruy Lopez, definitely playable. But it's, again, for white also, he has some prospects of getting some plus out of the opening. But the most straightforward is knight a5. This is now, I think, the most popular move in this position, knight a5, bishop a2. And now already c5 is not working so well because b4. White is in time to play b4. That's why, if you remember, in this position, if you start with knight a5 here, bishop c2, c5, here b4 is not so dangerous already because black can just play knight c6. And in case of knight c3, bishop e6, that is important, because in this position, if black is doing the same, c5, then b4, knight c6, and knight d5 is already quite unpleasant. It's a bit better for white. There were some games, but I don't think black can fully equalize here. So that's why after bishop a2, already black plays bishop e6. So the idea of knight a5 that if you remember, when black would play bishop e6 immediately, then white has knight d5 already. Here, knight d5 is not dangerous anymore. And this is a kind of main position maybe of the variation. White, Karyakin played d4, I think, in the World Championship match against Magnus Carlsen in the second game of the match. This is very solid, very safe, but I think it's quite harmless. Black takes, rook a2 and rook e8, for instance. Actually, I think it's the most accurate move because, if you take on e5, then black gets back this pawn quickly. I think this is not much for white. I mean, practically nothing. So d4 is solid but quite harmless. I think nowadays white tried to play this position, take on e6, play b4, and then bishop d2, and slowly maneuver around. Sometimes queen b1, even the ideas queen to b3, playing a4. I can advise you to check the games of Fabiano Caruana, especially he won a fantastic game against Levon Aranyan. I think it was this year of San Luis tournament where he scored, 10.5 out of 10. Very good game, which shows that the position has some venom. I mean, it's not so simple, but I think that after that game, black found some ways to equalize here, but again, it's playable. But I think the main move now is b4. So, of course, if knight c6, again, knight d5 is already quite unpleasant. So, black takes on a2, rook a2, knight c6. And frankly, this position looks totally equal to me. But, I mean, visually, but strangely enough, bishop g5, and there are quite many games now played in this position. And even if I still cannot really believe, to be honest, that white can really have anything special here, but statistics is in white favor. It's not so easy, and even modern engines show some little plus for white. I mean, it's but again, I'm pretty sure that if you spend some time analyzing this position, you'll find some way to equalize. But even Dean Liren, I think, lost a couple of games here, and so that is position maybe to investigate for both colors, whether you want to play it with white, and also if you want with black to equalize, to play a very solid way. And basically this is maybe the most solid and kind of simple to play variation against this system for black. But you need to find out the very clear way how to equalize, because for instance, if knight g4 was played, then the white's idea is actually not to exchange the bishop, to play bishop d2, black would come back, and then rook e1. I think it's one of the important positions, queen d7 and knight d5. So actually white's plan is to get a4, c4, to get some play there, and let's say knight d5, e5, knight a7, a4, followed by c4. There were some games of Vashiela graph here. Again, looks very close to equal, but still maybe a bit of pressure white still has. And then queen d7 is nowadays maybe the most popular move. And then a strange concept, white just wants to take on f6, takes knight d5, and then try to play c3, a4. Again, sometimes there were some games here on the top levels. Most of the time black manages finally to equalize, but sometimes not. Sometimes he's losing here. So okay, that is the situation in this a3 knight c3 variation. As you see, again, nothing special in any of those lines, but some little problems to solve still for black. So I just repeat myself again that if you're playing black, you better find some line and really, play one, choose one of it and analyze it really well, that you know that you equalize. And the choice is quite big. Many lines, many ways for black to get a position very close to equal, but still some small problems to solve. And with white, yeah, again, a good weapon to have. I don't know if, not sure if you have it, if you play it all the time, maybe your opponent will find some ways, will be preparing for you and then find some probably equality in one of those lines. But from time to time, definitely, a variation which is, I believe, you should have with white in your repertoire, because the play is quite simple, not too many forced lines, not much to learn, again, there is no 100% bulletproof way for black to equalize and to close this line yet. So that was about the d3 variation, which is becoming quite popular last few years. And now we move to rook e1, of course, definitely the main move. And I will show you first all those variations when black is playing d6 here, so he doesn't want to give up a pawn for nothing. And then the Marshall, when black castles and tries to play d5, sacrificing a pawn. And so those are two kind of different concepts. So, and the next two lessons will be first about the old-fashioned way of playing d6, and I'll try to make a summary of what is going on there in all major lines, give you my advices on what to do with white and which line I consider the best for black after d6. And then, we'll go to this Marshall and all attempts for white to fight against it, not to allow Marshall. So after castles, instead of playing c3, d5, white has also a4 move, d4, and so on. So I will try to, in my opinion, the most reliable for black is castle and d5. It's really, according to the modern theory, black really has no problem there. Even though, of course, white still has some tries, but in my opinion, that is the most reliable. But d6 also is okay to play d6. It's more for somebody who wants to get a typical positional game of Ruy Lopez, not to memorize lots of forced lines. And so it's a matter of taste, because sometimes your opening choices shouldn't be necessarily based on the objective assessment of which line is more fashionable, which line is a little bit, I would say, 0.1 better than the other line, but sometimes it's a type of game which you want. So that's why I will try to present you both of those concepts, and then you choose yourself what you prefer.